One of the things you can do with objects on a layer is make copies of them and transform them. Now in this case I have a fish on its own layer, and I don't even need to select it if I wanted to make a copy of it. To make a copy, you put your cursor on top of the object, hold down your Alt or Option key, and when you see that white arrow appear behind the black arrow, you can click and drag a copy off of the original. Now if you want to constrain the position of the copy while you're holding down your Alt or Option key, you can also hold down the Shift key and click and drag, like so. So now we have 3 fish, 3 separate layers, and if I wanted to, I could combine all 3 layers onto a single layer by merging them through the Layers panel. There are a couple things that you can do with objects on a layer if you wanted to transform them, and transform options are available to you through the Edit menu. You could do a free transform, which is Command or Control T, and that puts a bounding box around your selection, and with the bounding box you can grab any of the anchor points and you can click and drag to scale, like so, to make them look like sardines in a can. And this goes for any of the anchor points. And you could click and drag in any direction, which means that you could also flip things back and forth. When you put your cursor outside of a corner, you could also rotate the selection. If you like what you've done, you can click this checkbox here or hit Enter or Return on your keyboard. If you don't like what you've done, you can click this button here to cancel the transformation or hit your Escape key on your keyboard. Another way of working is to use the Edit Transform menu, and there are some presets in here that you may find handy. One thing I use a lot is the Flip Horizontal and Flip Vertical. So you may have the perfect image, but the image is oriented in the wrong direction. Flip Horizontal, flips it, one click, and you're done. You could also do the opposite direction, which is flipping vertical. Upside down fish may be exactly what you need or not, but that's where that is. There's also the rotate 180 and rotate 90 degrees clockwise and counterclockwise. I'm just going to undo with my keyboard shortcut. And then more importantly, there is all of the distortions that you can do. You can scale, you can rotate, you can skew, distort, perspective, and warp. And these are just isolated transformations apart from that free transform dialog box. So scale is like something you already saw, scaling. This just goes in any direction, with or without rotation. And if you want to constrain, you would hold down your Shift key before you click and drag, and then you would constrain the proportions of your selection. You could also rotate, in which case it's just spinning. And I love this smart guide. It tells you the exact angle of the rotation, positive or negative. I'm just going to escape to not do that. You could also skew. And when you have the skew, if you click and drag from one corner, you can see how you can adjust, depending on which direction you click in, adjust the look of your layer or your selected area. And it changes depending on which point you drag from. So you might really like that. It might be the perfect orientation for your artwork. Then there's Distort. And this will actually sort of flip your images, distort them. And again, depending on which point you drag from, can give you some really interesting angles. And escape again. After Distort, there's something called Perspective. So you can shift the perspective from left to right if you drag on one of these points, or forward or backward, like in space, to the left or to the right, depending on where you click. And the last one is Warp. This puts a mesh on top of your objects on the layer, and the mesh can be modified. Each anchor point has its own direction handles, which will allow you to adjust how the object is falling within the mesh area. The anchor points can be repositioned. You can drag anywhere on the mesh. And the longer these direction handles, the more skewed the object. The shorter the direction handles, the less skewed. And you can also swing these around in any direction to change how you're skewing. when you have the object the way you like it. Oh, and look, you could even fold the image on top of itself, which could be interesting if you were working on some kind of art project. Hit enter to keep it that way. We're going to undo here. The last option that I want to show you in transformation is something called Puppet Warp. With Puppet Warp, you get this really complex mesh on top of your image area. And then what you'll do is you'll set down pins so that you can modify or rotate your selection around the pin. So I put a pin on the fish's tail, and now I can modify the selection around the pin. So I might want to do something like this so it looks like this one's coming at me, and do something like this so that it looks like that one's going away, and then another one like this so it looks like this one's coming towards me, moving off the page. If you have multiple pins, then that's multiple rotation points. So now I could sort of twist and wiggle the fish almost like koi in a pond or something. And you can add as many pins as you like. To select a pin, you just click right on top of it, and that allows you to grab it and manipulate it. You can cut a pin by clicking Alt or Option as you click right on the pin, and that removes it. And you can have multiple levels of undo while you're in this mode. When you have everything the way you want it, and just like other transformations, you can click this checkbox or hit Enter and Return on your keyboard, or hit Escape or this button here, and this will remove all pins for you. There's other things that you can do, such as changing the rotate to fixed versus auto. You can set the angle. You can adjust the pin depth. You could have multiple pins and sort of in a hierarchical fashion adjust the depth. You can hide and show the mesh and change the expansion. Also, there's density, the number of points on your mesh, fewer or more. And then, of course, there's the mode, normal, rigid, or distort. And I usually work in normal because it's forgiving. Like I said, when you have it the way you want it, just hit Enter or Return, and you're good to go.